Hi guys, Jasmo here, and today I have for you a guide for the build that I was playing recently, and it was very fun build. I had a lot of fun leveling this character. I got to level 97, super fast character, very inventive and creative. I went out and just combined a couple of interesting mechanics together that work together, but nobody seems to be using them together. So this is just something fun to play, usually not as your first character, but once you have some currency and you can just get a little bit of a starting gear, you will have a lot of fun leveling and playing this character, especially if you want to do some fast mapping or something like the heist content. It's really fun and can be min-maxed to pretty high damage as well. Currently the build is not min-maxed at all, and without the headhunter it has like 4 million damage on single target, which is not nearly as good as it can be, but it has very fast clear, and that's what it was made for. So the build is basically a Viper Strike, a Death's Oath, Raider that is also frenzy stacking. I'm gonna go first through the gear, then I'm gonna go through all of the gems, or maybe actually the other way around. First I'll tell you about the gems, because the abilities that we're using are kind of the interesting part of this, and then we're gonna go through the gear and passives and other things as well. So first of all, the build is based around the idea of running Death's Oath and using it to the fullest potential, which means benefiting from everything that we can possibly benefit from, which includes the attack speed. A lot of the time right now that people who are playing Death's Oath are playing it with Caustic Arrow Bow because they want the 6 sockets so that they have some extra ability. However, I think it is much better to either play it with Blight or to at least with Toxic Rain if you're doing like the bow, because what you want with Death's Oath, what Death's Oath lacks is the single target damage. So you want something that you can stack on the single target. You want to either stack poisons or stack debuffs like with Blight or like with Toxic Rain. I think Caustic Arrow is a really horrible idea, and people who are doing that are just copying someone else who used to play Death's Oath and made that build. I think it's a really horrible choice of a skill to go with Death's Oath, and you probably shouldn't be doing that. You're much better off going with either Toxic Rain or going with some melee attack. For the melee attacks, however, we are very limited. Why are we limited? Because we need to have some kind of a 6-link. We could make a pseudo 6-link or even 7-link gloves for a skill like, for example, Pestilence Strike, or for Cobra Lash. Cobra Lash is probably like the best one because you can have like projectile damage, projectile speed, poison damage, and something else, and have that the extra 4-link here. Also do it with essences, right? You can craft a crazy good pair of gloves. However, it is much better to use the gloves for certain other things that we can craft here. As you can see, the +1 to frenzy charges and the strike skills target 2 additional nearby enemies. These are the important mods that we want on the gloves. So glove slot is kind of out of the way, which means in order to do a poison skill, we either need to go with a bow or we need to go with a sword and Viper Strike, because Viper Strike can be used with swords, and that means we can use actually a 2-handed sword, and that also gives us an extra option to stack the frenzy charges insanely high. Because we're playing Raider, because we're gonna want to go for maximum speed, like you can even sacrifice the Quartz Infusion if you're not doing harder content and go for the Avatar of the Chase. Because we're doing the Avatar of the Slaughter for the insane speed, we could also go for a Shaper Sword that can also have extra frenzy charge, right? So let me show you here. I gave up after like 60x because it's very hard to craft this sword. This is the best thing I came up with. This is the best thing I made, which is like 400 or something, or between 400 to 500 physical DPS, which is not as good as the weapon that I have in here, Edge of Madness, and it has the +1 to maximum frenzy charges. It's very hard to craft that. Essentially, how you want to craft that weapon, I'm gonna go through crafting items in a bit, but for now let me just tell you that the choice of the Viper Strike works very well. The reason why you want to go with the poison skill rather than with just damage over time, like for example Toxic Rain or Blight, is because you can also use the Plague Bearer, and that is a perfect synergy between the Plague Bearer and the Death's Oath. Both of them are chaos damage over time that you cannot really scale that much, so you have to do something like Aspect of the Spider, debuff the enemies through Witchfire Brew or whatever else. Maybe you can have an aura, right? We use the Impresence and have the Despair aura if you have the gems. I personally don't have the gems, so I should at this point already replaced this amulet, but that's what I had to start with. And basically you're doing chaos damage over time around you constantly, and you can just zoom really quickly through the map and everything around you dies. This is very, very fun to play. You just slap a couple of packs with the Viper Strike, pop off your Plague Bearer and just run through everything else and kill it very, very fast. Super fun playstyle, and also the Viper Strike playstyle is also very fun when you have that much attack speed and that much movement speed. The Raider provides so much of it. So that's the main piece, right? The Death's Oath and then the Edge of Madness. The reason why Edge of Madness is so good is because it gives you the added damage which scales with the levels, so the higher your level the better it is. You basically want to equip it at level, I think, 22. And since you equip it at level 22, you never change it unless you invest you have like a 100x weapon, right? Before that, nothing is better than that. Starforge is worse than this. Like you cannot find a better weapon than this. It would be struggling really hard. You need like 600 to 700 DPS weapon to get better than that, and even then it's kind of difficult because you're also getting like the +1 to level of socketed active skill gems, and actually Viper Strike is one of the attacks that has base damage added to it, which means it does scale decently well with the levels of socketed active gems or level of active gems in general. So this is like your best in slot weapon until you invest a lot into your weapon and get like 700 physical or chaos DPS weapon, ideally with also extra frenzy charge. That's what I would go for, but it doesn't necessarily have to have that frenzy charge. You'll still do more damage for a single target if you are gonna have like a 700 DPS weapon, which will cost you a little bit. So that's the weapon choice. In terms of the gems in those two weapons, what we want to run in the Death's Oath is a little bit different than most people are doing. We are sacrificing, I think, 4 or 5% damage to increase the AoE immensely, okay? So here's what you want to do. You want to run Awakened Swift Affliction, you want to run Efficacy, that will affect the aura. You want to run Concentrated Effect, okay, because that gives you a lot of damage. You want to run Awakened Void Manipulation. If you cannot awaken, then you just run regular Void Manipulation. Increased AoE, Awakened Increased AoE. Before you run Awakened Increased AoE, you can run something like less duration, right? Because we are running life tap support and using life tap with other skills to just get the life tap buff, the skill itself, the Death Aura, will benefit from the damage. It will deal 30% more damage while you have the life tap, and you will have the life tap all the time. As you can see, anytime you use a movement skill, like for example I use my Withering Step, it refreshes the life tap, so I keep life tap up all the time. And this means that the skill deals more damage. And then you can either use less duration, which will be a little bit easier to color because it's also a red gem, but Awakened Increased AoE is better because it's only I think 4% less damage, 4 or 5% less damage, but you get 50%, over 50% increased AoE, which is massive in terms of the clear. And since this ability is meant for the clear, this is not to be meant as your main source of single target damage, you don't care about it that much, that's why this is a little bit better. And the AoE will end up matching your Plague Bearer AoE a little bit more closely, which is also very, very good because your damage is more consistent. So that's what you want in your chest. In your weapon, you want to get it 6-linked as soon as you can. You want to get Viper Strike level 21, 23, normal quality, no alternate quality is better than the regular one because the regular one gives you very, very good bonuses. It gives you increased attack speed and it gives you increased poison duration, both of which are extremely good. And then you want to use Awakened Melee Phase, just Melee Phase before you have the Awakened one. You want to use Fortify, that also makes you a little bit more tanky. Once you attack a couple of times, once you get your Frenzy charges up, which give you more dodge, once you get the Fortify, the character actually becomes pretty tanky, and that's why I'm level 97 and had no trouble. Once I switched to a little bit more tanky setup, you don't die pretty much at all when you're running like the easier content. Awakened Deadly Ailments before the Awakened, right? Unbound Ailments, Awakened version whenever you can, and Chaos, added Chaos Damage, Awakened. You want to get it level 5 as soon as you can. If you can purchase Awakened Added Chaos Damage Support, level 5 as soon as you meet the level requirement, which is level 80. This will give you also +1 to the level of supported active skill gems, which gives you also the +1 to the Viper Strike. This is very huge. This is the best, one of the best support gems you can have when it's level 5. When it's level 4, there are some other better ones, but you can check that in POE by yourself. Just plug in and see which other skill gems will support it better. But this is something that is the optimal one when you can have it level 5. So that's what we want in here. One thing that you don't see here is Ancestral Call. You want to use Ancestral Call until you get the gloves. So instead of running Awakened Melee Phase, you will use the Ancestral Call, because that will let you slap multiple monsters around you, which is very, very good. You also want to anoint Tribal Fury, right? So with Tribal Fury and Ancestral Call, you'll be hitting like 4 enemies around you. It's going to be very, very nice. But before the gloves, you want to use the gem. After you get the gloves, here are the gloves. You want to actually switch to just Awakened Melee Fizz and only rely on your Tribal Fury Anointment and the gloves. The gloves have strike skills, target 2 additional nearby enemies, maximum frenzy charges, chaos res, some resistances crafted on it, and ideally, if I went to like min-max and I wanted to craft these better, which would mean doing more Awakener slams with them, just imprinting them back, doing more Awakener slams, that would mean that I would also get extra life on this and extra chaos damage over time multiplier, which is very, very easy to get. I'm gonna talk about crafting items in a bit. For the belt, Headhunter is alright. It doesn't help you that much. It's really cool in ultimatums, but it's not necessary for the build. You will do more damage if you actually just get a Stygian Vice with life, resists, chaos res, and chaos damage. Like percentage max health and like high tier maximum life with like increased chaos damage and then resistances on a Stygian Vice is gonna be the best in slot build. And it's gonna actually be much easier for you to fix your resistances. You're gonna be doing more single target damage, so Headhunter is not necessary at all. It just basically makes you run faster when you're clearing like heists, when you're doing ultimatums and maps. So for that reason, Headhunter is very, very nice, but by no means necessary for the build at all. When it comes to the boots, you want Dark Ray Vectors. They give you +1 Frenzy Charge, which is what we really want. We want to stack up the Frenzy Charges. And it also gives you a dodge per Frenzy Charge and gives you movement speed per Frenzy Charge and some Lightning Res. You want to get it either corrupted with something good or enchanted with increased movement speed if you haven't been hit recently, because we don't get hit that much because of the immense dodge that we have. We basically are going to be running around with capped dodge and spell dodge most of the time. For the helmet, you want to make sure that you get nearby enemies have a -9 to chaos res or -12 to chaos res, and also get some reduced mana reservation on either Scatterbots or Malevolence. You can craft this very easy yourself with like Aberrant spam, and this is just a placeholder helmet I crafted quickly and it works for now, but later you can craft better ones. You can also elevate the negative chaos res, which would be ideal, to like -12 chaos res for the enemies nearby, which would be the better one and would increase your damage by a lot. And of course you want to get some extra resists on that as well. On top of that, the very important thing to craft on the helmet would be +2 to level of AoE gems, which comes from Unveiling. So you basically want to craft your helmet, make sure that you have an empty prefix, and then you want to go for just buy or grind yourself from Betrayal Ashling tier 4, and you slap the Unveil, and how you hope for the +2 to level of all AoE gems. This will give your Plaguebearer extra +2 to the levels, which is massive. Plaguebearer scales extremely well with the levels because it increases the maximum amount of stored poison, and you do reach that cap with a couple of slaps usually. So this is very, very good to get. So +2 to levels would make it, what is it, 24 right now, so +2 would make it 26, and then Amulet can make it like 28. You could run with like a 28 Plaguebearer, which would be an insane amount of damage. So that's what you want to do. For the gems that I have for the Plaguebearer, I have increased AoE, I have Intensify, which also gives me increased AoE, and Empower for the extra levels, +3 to the levels as well, because Empower works very, very well with that. In terms of the remaining gems I have Herald of Agony, Precision, Enlighten, and Malevolence. You can also run Scatterbots, which are very, very good. It's very hard to fit everything. You might not need Precision, depending on whether you find accuracy on other pieces of gear. You could get accuracy, I think maybe you can get on the helmet, but you can get it on the amulet, which you should have a rare amulet crafted. You can get it on the rings as well, and that will help you a lot with the accuracy, and then you could drop the precision and run something like skitterbots, for example, right? Herald of Agony is also not that important. Skitterbots will give you a little bit more damage most of the time. For the movement, for the mobility, you want to run Smoke Mine and Withering Step, and you want to combine them with Second Wind and also Life Tap. Level 1 Life Tap will make sure that you always have Life Tap so that your Death Aura deals more damage. When it comes to the rings, we have basically, you just want life and resists. You can also have the craft for reduced mana cost to skills. It's very, very helpful. And on top of that, you could get something like accuracy. You could get AoE on that. You could get increased chaos damage from essences. But more importantly, I would try to aim, if you're trying to min-max the build, for the Frenzy Charges rings. If you can get yourself 2 Frenzy Charge rings, and you can get yourself also +1 to Frenzy Charge sword on top of that, you're gonna be running at 12 Frenzy Charges, I think, either 12 or 13, just like an insane number of Frenzy Charges. If you wanted to go really extreme, you would also corrupt the gloves for +1 to Frenzy Charges, which would give you just, I think, yeah, that would be like 13 Frenzy Charges or something, which is absolutely insane. It's an insane amount of movement speed, attack speed, because with Frenzy Charges, we're scaling the movement speed from the boots, the movement speed from the Avatar of the Slaughter, and the movement speed from this one, which I think every Frenzy Charge gives you like 10 or 11% movement speed, which means with 12 you get like 120-130% increased movement speed, which is really, really strong. For the flasks, let me actually talk about the amulet. So in Presence is like a good starter amulet, but ideally you'd like, on prefixes, you'd like maximum life, you would like to have the +1 to all chaos skill gems and +1 to all dexterity skill gems, which will not only give you +2 levels to the Plague Bearer, but it will also give you the +2 levels to the Viper Strike, which benefits from it a lot. And then you also would like to have like, you can go for Malevolence Reservation, you can go for chaos damage over time multiplier, you can go for reduced mana cost. You basically pick and choose whatever you want from that. And you could also go on all 3 jewelry pieces for minimum endurance charges. You could go for like 3 minimum endurance charges, or maybe Ashling endurance charge, which also gives you a chance to get endurance charge on kill, I think. So that's what you want to go for that. Corralito, in terms of the flask, is your most important flask by far. It increases the damage like crazy. Without it, you do like half of the damage. Witchfire Brew, pretty important because we are missing the sockets. Ideally, you would avoid it, right? Ideally, you don't want to run these flasks because there are better options, like the Despair Aura usually is better than the flask. However, we don't have the sockets for it, so we have to run the Witchfire Brew. Then we also run the Life Flask, which is instant, removes bleed. And then we also run like movement speed flasks with either curse immunity or adrenaline. And then you want to also run the Quartz Flask with like freeze immunity. The reason why we are running Quartz Flask, even though I am using the Quartz Infusion, is because I want the extra dodge, right? I want the extra dodge and hit the dodge cap, because the closer you get to 75% attack and spell dodge, the better it is. So that's it when it comes to the gear, basically, and also the gems. When it comes to the passive skill points, this is a little bit more complicated. Right now I have like a basic setup that uses Divine Flesh. The build uses Divine Flesh because, as you can see, we have 87% chaos resistance, which is pretty good. That means I have exactly between the halfway between 75 and 87 is my elemental resistance, which makes me even more tanky. We also are using Wind Dancer with all the spell dodge and attack dodge, which is very, very good. In terms of other jewels, we are using also the Watcher's Eye with damage over time multiplier while affected by Malevolence. That's the important one. And we are also using these cluster jewels. For the cluster jewels, you want to go for large ones with as much increased chaos damage and maybe attack speed, stuff like that. And you also want to go for the medium ones that have basically increased chaos damage, damage over time multiplier, things like that. So also important one is low tolerance. Poisons you inflict on non-poisoned enemies deal 300% increased damage. This is very, very important. This is like one of your most important passives, because that lets you stack the Plague Bearer much, much faster. And for the small ones, we're going for Born of Chaos, so that I get the extra maximum Chaos res. Ideally, what I would do is also cut this part, or cut like at least some of this part. Just make sure I'm grabbing the frenzy charge, maybe even cut this part. Like basically we have to cut something from here in order to move this divine flesh probably to this spot, which would be the least points that it would require. Also there is an option of using this spot for that, and then put here another cluster jewel setup, which would basically mirror this one. Instead of 2 Born of Chaos, I would run only 1 Born of Chaos, because that would bring me to the 90% Chaos resistance cap. And then I would also run all of the same things except for low tolerance, because you only want 1 of those, right? And that would be by far the most damage, I think. And also make sure you're running Growing Agony. This is a really good one to get something like Corrupted Blood immunity, because it's very cheap to get a Growing Agony with like a Corrupted Blood immunity, because it's not a very popular skill. People are not really playing Viper Strike, Raider Death Oath builds. This is not something that people do, but it's very, very fun. Throughout this video, you'll be seeing some footage. I'll probably put some footage either at the beginning or the end as well, so that you can better see how the build functions. But that's basically it. The playstyle is just pop your flasks, slap a couple of packs with Viper Strike, and then pop your Plague Bearer, and then run through everything like a race car with Death Aura. It's very, very fun. Let me also talk about the gloves, because I didn't mention the gloves. That's like a very, very important item that I think it's important to know how to craft that, because otherwise you will not be able to buy this, because again, nobody plays this fucking build, so nobody will craft it for you. So for the gloves, you want to make sure that you get a Hunter's Apothecary gloves that are at least level 84. If you cannot find a Hunter's one, you just get a Hunter's Exalted Orb and make them Hunter gloves. And you want to make sure that you alt spam until you get the strike skills target an additional enemy, because you cannot get the target to additional enemy because that's an elevated mod. So that's what we need to do first. So you make sure that you get the strike skills target an additional enemy, and then you imprint that. If you also had another mod on it, you annul. If you fail the annul, you imprint back. Imprint it again, try again until you get this mod isolated. That is a prefix. Then you also craft on a suffix for 2x. Prefixes cannot be changed. So now you have a magic item with the +1 to strike skills, right? Like strike skills target an additional enemy, nearby enemy, and prefixes cannot be changed. You imprint that again, which means you save it, right? You save it again. What you're gonna do then is you regal that. If you don't have an elevated mod through the regal, you're gonna do chaos rerolls. So you're gonna use these things, right? Let me show you. I have a bunch of those. Reforge a rare item with a new modifier, including a chaos modifier. Chaos modifiers are more common. This is likely to give you something like chaos damage over time on a suffix. Once you get that, you Maven Orb that, right? You Maven Orb and it's a 50-50. So if you fail the 50-50, you imprint it back, and when you imprint it back, you're gonna have again the +1 strike skills with prefixes cannot be changed, because we saved that, so we don't have to waste 2x again on the prefixes cannot be changed. So again, you regal that again, and then you reforge it again. Hope to get another influence mod, and then if you get the other influence mod, you Maven Orb again. Once you Maven Orb that, you will have one modifier that is elevated. That is only one influence modifier, that is the strike skills target 2 additional nearby enemies. And that is your base that you're gonna awaken and slam on. What you're gonna do then is get any gloves that are that have the +1 to maximum frenzy charges and no other mods, no other influence mods, right? They can have other mods, but just no other influence mods, so that the Awakener Orb is guaranteed to give you the +1 to maximum frenzy charges. What you do after that is you basically use the Awakener Orb on these gloves and slap them on top of your base. And that will combine the +1 to maximum frenzy charges with the strike skills target 2 extra nearby enemies. And then you basically pray you don't get a shitty prefix. Ideally, you get no prefix, because you are very unlikely to get anything better than crafted life. So if you don't get a prefix, If you don't get a prefix, then you're in the money. You can craft amazing pair of gloves. If you do get a prefix, like I did, the lightning damage to attacks, you basically either say, okay, I'm happy with these gloves for now, or I'm gonna invest more currency into it, and then you imprint it back to the pre-elevated state, and then again you elevate it, you Awakener Slam again, and you hope for a good Awakener Orb. You can also annul before you do that, right? Before you imprint back, you of course would try to annul the prefix off of them. So ideally, you want to have like no prefix, and then these two prefixes that are the +1 to frenzy charges and nearby enemies, and those are gonna be the great ones. You can also craft prefixes cannot be changed and do more chaos rerolls. That is very likely to give you chaos damage over time multiplier as well as chaos resistance, and then maybe nothing else. That means you could craft something with Ashling 4, for example, right? You could do either prefix or suffix with the Ashling 4, and the other one will be your crafted mod. And that's how you can get these gloves. They're absolutely insane. They basically give you an extra link to your weapon. They give you basically like awakened melee phase damage support level 5. That's basically the value of these gloves, plus the frenzy charge, plus life, plus chaos dot multi, plus chaos res very likely, which you need for the fact that you're running like high chaos res build with the divine flesh. So that's how you craft these gloves. Very, very useful, very, very important for the build, and that would be the first thing I would focus on crafting once you get some currency if you want to invest into this build. Other than that, just enjoy it. It's a very, very fun build. It's very fun to run through maps quickly with it. That's gonna be it for the video. Check out my stream at Asmodeus stream on Twitch TV. I'm actually going to be probably streaming some World of Warcraft because I'm getting into the TBC since the TBC is releasing, and I'm super hyped to do some raids and then do a lot of PvP. Probably gonna have some PvP movies coming on this channel, as well as some either informational or some highlight videos from the World of Warcraft. So stay tuned also for that. And I'm not gonna quit POE, but the league is dying out a little bit, so it's gonna be a little bit of a break from POE. Gonna make some World of Warcraft content, and then when the next league launches, we're gonna come back to POE, do some POE, and then mix those two depending on which one I play more. But that's gonna be it. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.